The night Ash was abandoned by his stepmother was a cruel one, colder than any he had known. The snow fell relentlessly, biting at his tiny body, coating his fur with ice. At only a few months old, he barely understood the malice behind his stepmother's actions, but he could feel the sharp sting of betrayal. Her words echoed in his mind as she slammed the door shut behind him. "Go freeze, little kitten." He stumbled through the snow, his tiny paws struggling to keep him upright, but the weight of his broken heart kept dragging him down. He couldn't fathom why she, who had once pretended to care for him, could cast him aside so callously. The cold seeped into his bones, and with each step, his hope withered. But even in the darkest moments, survival was instinctual. He remembered the warmth of his mother's voice, long gone, and the faint memories of being loved, fragile and distant as they were. Through the harsh wind and the biting frost, a fire began to grow within him. If he was going to survive this, he would have to change. The world had abandoned him, but it had also ignited something fierce within him, a determination to rise from the ashes of his broken past. Weeks passed, but the world Ash had once known was gone. The snowstorms were no longer a barrier. They were a part of him, an obstacle he had learned to conquer. The kitten who had once struggled to move through the snow now moved through it with purpose, with power. His body, once frail and trembling, was now lean, strong, and hardened by his ordeal. He had hunted for food, scavenged for warmth, and fought for his life with the ferocity of an animal that had nothing left to lose. The cold that had once crushed him now fueled his every step. And as the days turned into weeks, Ash began to notice something else. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. His mind, once clouded with confusion and pain, was sharp, calculating. His heart, though broken, was now a weapon. He could feel it deep inside. He was no longer the helpless kitten abandoned by the cold-hearted woman who had called herself his family. No, Ash had become something far more dangerous. The world had broken him, but it had also shaped him into something terrifying. One night, under a pale, haunting moon, Ash returned. The mansion he once called home loomed before him, the place that had once promised warmth, security, and love. But now it was nothing more than a symbol of his deepest pain. His stepmother's laughter had once filled these halls, but now it only fueled his rage. He stepped silently through the snow, his breath coming out in soft clouds, but there was nothing soft about the way he moved. He was the predator now, and the prey was waiting for him. The house was still, too still. It should have been full of life, bustling with the noises of the servants and his stepmother's allies, but all was quiet. Ash knew they had no idea he was coming, and that made it all the sweeter. He felt the weight of every step he took, knowing that each one brought him closer to his revenge. When he finally arrived at the grand entrance, he didn't knock. Instead, he simply walked through the door as if he had never left. His stepmother stood frozen in the hallway, her eyes wide in disbelief. She had no idea what had become of him, but she knew, instinctively, that he was no longer the helpless kitten she had tossed aside. "Ash?" His stepmother's voice trembled with fear, and it pleased him. She had once been the one to hold all the power in this house, her voice a force that could bend everyone to her will. Now her voice was small, a fragile thing quivering under his gaze. "What? What are you doing here?" she stammered, her face pale with terror. Ash took a slow, deliberate step forward, savoring her fear, watching the way she recoiled from him as if he were a ghost. In some ways, he was. The kitten she had abandoned had died long ago, replaced by something darker, something far more dangerous. His lips curled into a cold smile, a smile that held no warmth, no mercy. "I came back for you," he said, his voice low, steady, and full of a quiet malice that made her flinch. The years of neglect, the harsh winter nights, the hunger, the pain, all of it came rushing back in that moment, and Ash felt a surge of power. He had returned not to beg for her forgiveness, but to show her just how wrong she had been. She had thought she could break him, but instead, she had made him into a force she couldn't comprehend. The mansion erupted into chaos as Ash took control. The servants, once loyal to his stepmother, scrambled in fear as he silenced them one by one, his movements swift and unforgiving. There was no hesitation in him now, no compassion. His eyes, once soft and full of wonder, were now steely and unyielding. His stepmother's allies, the people who had watched her mistreat him and said nothing, were now nothing more than obstacles to be eliminated. Ash moved through the mansion like a shadow, striking fear into the hearts of those who had once been untouchable. His stepmother's screams echoed through the halls, but he was unfazed. He had no intention of letting her die quickly. No, this would be a slow and agonizing descent. When he finally dragged her before him, her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. She was no longer the powerful woman who had thrown him out into the snow. She was a broken shell, begging for mercy. "Please, I was wrong. Forgive me," she sobbed. But Ash's heart was stone. He had already given her the chance to make things right, and she had chosen her path. He stood up from his chair, his presence towering over her. "You never gave me a chance," he said, his voice low and filled with a cold venom. "Now I'll make you beg for mercy." And in that moment, Ash realized something. It wasn't revenge that had brought him here. It was justice, and the world would never forget his name.